All right, I'll call the meeting to order at 6:05. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first order of business is to approve the agenda. I'll move to approve the agenda with the deletion of D1 under policy. That was put on there by mistake. Are there any other additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. General public comment. Is there anyone from the public tonight who wishes to speak? All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda. So you might have noticed that the consent agenda might look a little bit different. So I wanted to try and utilize the consent agenda as it's intended, which is reoccurring matters of business, of regular meetings, can usually be approved under the consent agenda in one motion. So the idea is minutes, warrants, hiring, all that stuff can be put into the consent agenda to basically save meeting time. We don't have to make motions for everything. I would ask that if anyone wanted to discuss anything within the consent agenda, we can move it out of the consent agenda into the onto the agenda if there were any questions or concerns, or in, like, we'll say the case of like the minutes, if any changes needed to be made. But now would be the time to do that. All right, so is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Matt. All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Superintendent's report.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Just a few items to go through. The NWA MAPS testing has been completed. You know, Rick and Carol talked a little more about that when they do their superintendent's report. We are looking to provide information to the board probably at the December or January board meeting, just whenever we can compile all that. Really would have just give us just kind of our fall scores, just kind of see where we're at. And then we'd be looking at, winter just for comparison standpoint, which we will have some of these NWA map reports for you. Along those same lines, I know we just received some information today from the AOE. This was not on your reports because it came when I was at my conference this afternoon. And Rick and Carol haven't even heard about this yet, but they'll receive more information. We did receive a word that the state is moving away from SBAC, and they're moving to a new test for this spring. So we are waiting for more information on that. Once we have more information, we'll be sharing that with the administration as well as the families about what that will look like. And what sort of impact that will have on us for this year. I'll be honest, it is a bit frustrating just because the fact that we look at from prior to COVID, now we have COVID, and just we continue to have these assessments, and there'll always be an asterisk next to them in terms of interruptions. But the state has made the decision to shift, and like I said, once we have more information on what that the new test looks like, we will send that out to us. And Rick and Karen will talk a little bit more about it next Thursday at our admin meeting. And we should have some more information by then.
All right, thank you.
GRCSU In-Service Day is this Friday. This is an opportunity really just do some building level things, as well as district and SU wide, particularly around MTSS. I know the K through 2 has to do a lot with what's called Fast Bridge. It's just Rick and Carol talked a little bit more about that. It's a tool that's being used along lines with MTSS to help identify deficits and strengths with our students. But like I said, I'll let them talk a little bit more about that because they will be helping oversee that professional development. Strategic plan, we did have our first meeting on Monday. It was, so thanks to Eric who was able to make it, and Rick and Carol were there. But it was a good kickoff. I think in that meeting we just kind of talked about just important to graduates, as well as just our goals for the process, and start to think about where we want to be at and start to identify priorities. Our next meeting is on November 7th, is in person at West Rutland. So anybody who can make it, that'd be great. But as we go through the process, we will be providing updates to the boards, just kind of see where we're at, and if there are opportunities for feedback, Sue or Matt or Amanda, you can share with Eric as well, just or myself or Rick or Carol, just feedback or just your thoughts, and we could bring that back to the committee as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is just the professional learning that myself, Rick, Carol, and Lisa Madison are going. Last year, the admin team went through the University of Washington Center for Ed Leadership Instructional Leadership Program. Rick went through that, but then with COVID and with a variety of other issues, staffing had to kind of step back a little bit from this, or from last spring. We were able to get Rick back into that this year, and Carol obviously being first year. So they were kind of going through it's kind of a 1.5, so it's kind of in between year 1, year 2. But it is a program that the 4 of us are undertaking. It's a year long, and really focused on just improving the quality of feedback. I know we look at the single most important factor, at least from a school's perspective, on student learning. That is the quality of instruction. The second most is the quality of the building principal. And so this instructional leadership really focuses on both. Is having myself and Lisa continue to work with Rick and Carol, and the quality of feedback that we provide to our staff, and in terms of accountability, in terms of providing high quality instruction for all of our students. And so there's a trickle down. So it's a great program. We've seen a lot of benefits for this. But as we go through, Rick and Carol and I can kind of talk more about that. So and the rest is just more informative. We do have the VSPA, VSA annual conference coming up on the 20th and 21st of October. I know that Eric is going to be there. If you cannot attend, we did learn that there will be a recording through a webinar, so I'll send that information out to the board as well. So if those people can't attend in person, can view that later on as well. So you just kind of see what was covered, just points of discussion. All right. And just a reminder there's more to Middletown Springs about the Helen Henderson Education Trust. Information has been sent out to the graduates of 2022. So the deadline for that, just to make sure, is November 30th. So if you are interested, please fill out the application and get that in. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or to Rick, and we'll get that information to you. So thanks.
Great. I have a question. The supervisor union set out a survey that was for like the strategic plan,
Yes.
right? Have you been getting like results back on that?
So
or-
I can view it because that's going through our facilitator. That information is going to be used for the second meeting. And I think we've had probably close to 80 respondents. So it's been pretty good response from there. The feedback has been good. Basically, it's just about, I guess, hopefully you've seen that. It was a longer survey. I know Sue, I think it was at the last meeting, talked about surveys and your thoughts on this. And sometimes the longer survey, the more the return is for someone to fill it out. But we did have a good respondents from a variety of our communities, some good honest feedback about their thoughts about where we're at and where they would like to see our schools go. The one concern that we hear, and it's something which I've talked about since I started, was we're not trying to create identical schools across our SU. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose really is to just ensure that all of our kids have access to the necessary programs, resources, and have access to high quality instruction. And we understand that there's a delicate balance of, moving that forward, but also still respecting, communities and community, identities and, some of the great things that are going on in each of our schools. But we want to make sure that all of our kids have access to the resources they need to be successful. So,
Yeah, that's what why I wanted to inquire, because if that information is going to be used in the next strategic plan process, the more people who participate.
We'll probably send more information out. I think myself or Lisa Madison will send a reminder. I think we've asked Rick and Carol to include that in the newsletters as well. We'll probably shut that off probably in the next couple weeks. So then we'll tell the group that's facilitating can just kind of collect it, present it to the November 7th meeting.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks for asking.
Any questions for the superintendent?
Yeah, for the MAPS test that the kids just did,
Yes.
will there be another presentation to the board in terms of where the kids' strengths are? And
Well, yeah, so maps, the fall maps really is it's like a baseline.
right,
Kind of provides us an opportunity to see where they're at, and so
Yeah.
then teachers can set goals for for the midwinter, or I think it's in February they'll be tested.
Yeah.
So we'll present, we'll take a look to see where we're at with this, and then we can actually do a comparison from last fall to this fall.
yeah,
So we can ask Al George to prepare that, and then we'll be able to present that.
yeah. I know last year there was no comparison points because we decided, I guess it was skewed because of COVID.
Well, no, the reason why last year was the first year we were able to do MAP with fidelity for the whole year.
Okay.
So we started MAP, it was the first year we started MAP was the first year COVID hit.
Oh,
So then
I
we
see.
shut it down, and then we did not do MAP the following year. And
I
then,
see.
so last year was the one to fidelity, so we have a full set of MAP scores from the year, so fall, winter, and spring. So we could look at the fall of 2021, fall of 22. So
Great.
if, like my child, say in third grade, we could look at the second grade, and we look at third grade just to see growth over the course of the year, or if there's regression, and then we can talk a little more about how that will be used to inform instruction and curriculum and lessons now to the winter.
Awesome. And I remember when we were looking at those, we couldn't get view into certain topics, I think because we didn't have, it met some threshold with the number of students.
So there are conversations that we can have in executive session.
Okay.
They're in a public session, when the number is dropped so low, and a lot of our cohorts are relatively low, and so they fall below the threshold that we can't discuss it publicly because it might, have some identifying information. But we could, as a board, move into executive session where we could look at that information there. So because that
Okay.
would be shared publicly.
Okay. I was going to mention if you're presenting it and you're cutting up the data, maybe combining both schools and certain subjects versus individual
Yeah,
schools.
we'll take a look, see what
Okay.
we can do. So sure.
Perfect.
Yep. that'd be
Awesome.
good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Matt. Thank you.
Question on the new testing that's going to be done. Is there software involved in that we have to purchase, or is that going to be something that's going to be provided to us, or do we have a clue what the heck's going on?
As of right now, we don't know. Like I said, I received a memo this afternoon, and I know I was at a conference with Lewis and Lisa Madison, and I shared these, it was like, just give me some time to process this. But I think it's one where I think it's going to move pretty quickly. But this is sometimes the frustrating thing about the state is to make these decisions not really understanding the impact and how it's going to affect us.
So there could be software purchasing that's going to be involved, or no?
That I don't know. Potentially, I guess, yes. I mean, if it
Didn't we
becomes a
just
soft.
purchase the last thing just a while ago? Wasn't there a purchase of the last testing that they tried to do, the new kind? I'm trying to think. But then again, my last thought was that was 6 years ago when I was on the board. So maybe it's old by now.
So, we'll have a better understanding in November when we meet again. Like I said, we'll have information go out to the boards. I know that Lewis, obviously, we'll take a look at from a budgeting perspective, but I don't think, I think the state is well aware that we're in the middle of budget cycles, we're budgeting, and then to drop something like this on, I think they'll have some sort of plan in place for us.
Sure.
So, I'm trying to be optimistic here.
Okay,
Yeah.
glad you are.
Well,
I think it'll be really interesting though too, because they're starting new testing, we'll have to wait for 2 years worth of testing to have a comparison?
Well, regardless of, and this is, like I said, I've worked in Illinois, worked in New Jersey, now in Vermont. I think one of the things is they're all still will be linked to the Common Core standards.
Okay.
And that's something which the standards will not be any different. So whatever that test is, like say New Jersey was PARC exam and Illinois had a different exam, but they're all linked back to the standards. So the work that the curriculum team has done, the work that our classroom teachers are doing, it won't be an impact for them because they're still will be assessed on those standards. It really would just be what that test looks like. It just, we don't know as of yet what the test is.
Right.
So it's not going to be a major shift. Like I said, our teachers will continue doing the things they're doing because the same standards they were doing yesterday will be impacted by this.
But could you like compare SBAC results compared to this?
That I don't know.
That's-
I mean,
that's what I was
that's a real good question. That I don't know.
Okay, yeah, we'll wait.
Yeah, I think once we learn more about this, it's, I mean, I'd have to see what it looks like and what the state rolls out in the next couple of weeks.
All right.
Okay.
Sorry to keep asking, but sort of, we're in the weeds here, but is it once a year or is it multiple?
It'll still be offered during the spring, once a year.
Once a year. Okay.
All right. Move on to principals reports.
Rock, paper, scissors. No, I'll go first. So just to build upon the conversation about FastBridge, SBAC, and map testing. So our new MTS model withstands multiple tiered systems of support. Each school is having a dedicated educational support team. We're meeting 2 hours a week, which really for me, for a small school, is a pleasure to have that dedicated time to look at data. One of the surprising thing is where you actually get to line up all the data from all the students that are struggling, and you compare tests, like a student may be struggling in map testing, but in the FastBridge, which is assesses in a different way. So you're having all these different lenses. So it's difficult just to have you look at the map testing without seeing a full picture. And I mean, we have students who did quite well on the SBAC testing, but didn't do well on the map testing. And you're going, well, all right, so what is this data telling you? So it's this rich conversation that we're having 2 hours a week. It's a dedicated team that we bring teachers in that have those students to have those discussions and talk about strategies. Well, is it really, what's the data showing? Is that student really struggling, and having those conversations about the work they're actually doing in the classroom? So it's tough to, especially for a small school, to look at one data point and saying, I'm not sure it gives you a full picture of how the school's doing. I know optics is, but there's been some really surprising things, and actually some growth too. And I do like FastBridge. I know it's not quite as difficult to give, but also I think gives a better picture. The data goes deeper, and it really does give you a direction of where the students are and what they need for help. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. I want to thank for all the parents and community members that came to the open house. We had a great open house. It's like stepping back 3 years ago before we had COVID. We had a potluck dinner, and we had a community survey, and kids were not running, but visiting all the classrooms
No, they were
around.
running.
And most beautiful thing, seeing a pre-K student take the parents up to upstairs, the other classroom. They probably have never been there before, but it was just a pleasure to see the families, and it was just a wonderful time. We also started up something we had to halt after the start of COVID. Is what we call our cauldrons, where we have mixed little, it's like advisory groups, but we have 8 where the plan is, the way we had it before is you have this one advisory group that you're with all the way through Middletown Springs. So say it's Sherry McNeil. If you're in that advisory group, you would be in that advisory group, and we just bring more people in as people leave. It just builds that relationship with at least one strong person in the classroom, but just the impact of having the mixed level and kids supporting each other. And I think that's one thing we missed with COVID. And I'm excited to have that back. We're having our first all-school celebration, which is connected to positive behavior intervention supports, which is PBIS. This is where the kids get recognized for their contributing to a positive school environment. And so we're having cider donuts and cider tomorrow, plus the staff are going out and play kickball with the kids, which is, once again, building that strong community. And I can't say enough about relationships. That's what builds a strong school. We are connecting with VINS again for some science, which has worked out really well for us. And that's kind of it. I think we've had a great start to the school year, and there's a lot we're trying to pull together with the direction, but credits to the staff of hanging with me on it. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
ahead.
The fast bridge, is that what SBAC is replacing?
No, FastBridge is kind of like it's like map testing. So we do it 3 times. Map and FastBridge are 2 assessments that we do 3 times a year. The point probably at some point will drop. We're doing a comparison right now of FastBridge and MAP, and at some point we'll, well, I don't guarantee, but probably drop 1, which I think FastBridge does a better job at this point of.
So what we'd probably look to do is we'd probably keep Fastbridge with their early ed, and then we'd look to keep maps for our upper grades. But that's something which has been discussed, but I think this year we're just having everyone do Fastbridge just through MTSS. Just have, one common data point, and then we'll eventually wean ourselves off one, because MAP will be able to do that as well for our kids.
So map testing is definitely is all computer based. So part of the problem is you're testing the computer based skills of the student, and students come in at different places. Where for the younger students, K through first, it's all teacher given, and they're pretty quick assessments, but they dive pretty deep into where the students are. Where especially as you get up in the older grades, some of the map testing you can take. By the time you go through all, we've had like a week and a half of kids trying to work through the test. It's not the whole day, but we give them a block of time, morning. It takes a long time to go through, so part of the challenge is to engage a student that long in an assessment like that. So
they're doing maps and fast.
at this point, yeah.
The advisory group, how does that work?
So our cauldron, so we have the students split up. So like so the reason that they're called cauldrons because we're the wizards and Harry Potter and we have dragons and everything. So it's all based on that. So we have 8 cauldron leaders, and we try to put a 6th grader in every group, and at least 1 5th grader in every group, and down through, and then we kind of split everything up. So the plan is that you'll stay with that cauldron for the whole year. Next year, unless there's a change of staff, you'll be back with that cauldron. If you have a 6th grader graduates, you bring it in the next year's K, and you just kind of keep reversing. So the whole idea is to build this really strong community relationship. You have peers that you've been with, a mixed grade level peer that you've been with since you've been in the school, and so we did it for 3 years, I think, before the pandemic, and you could just see the community. And then we come together for an all-school meeting the 4th Wednesday of the month, and this is where we share cauldrons and we share what our learning is. And so I think it's a really positive thing that we haven't had for the last 2.5 years.
Is it once a week?
Once a week for 30 minutes, like we had our first one today, so 8 o'clock, we disperse the kids and they go to the different rooms, and then we send them back, and it's worth the time. I know it's if you don't have a strong community and kids are feeling good about themselves, the kids are not going to learn. So.
All right.
I don't think we get covered it. Sorry.
No. No, I'm going to go back to the EST process because having those 2-hour meetings has really brought a group of people together that can talk about kids, look through all of the results from MAPS testing, fast bridge testing. Our interventionist is new this year. And one of the things that she found, she really feels like she's pretty great at using fast bridge because she's used it for 3 years. And she was digging just a little bit deeper and she found that she can look at the data points that we get from testing from kids and go in and it will give direct interventions that she can share with teachers so they know exactly where to meet the student and the need that student has and where they can go to actually help them build on that skill. So that's been real, I think that's been really positive. And I have to say the 2 hours, although it initially sounds like a lot, I mean, the meetings are very focused and we have gotten a lot out of them. And I think the teachers are really happy with the information that's coming back because they're not totally responsible for doing all of.
It's a team.
It is a team and it really has a huge benefit to the school. And I think in the long run, it's helped a lot with pulling out the information that we need to pull out from the testing. And like Rick said, it's really interesting to look at MAPS versus FastBridge because for some students you look and say, how did that happen? How do they have such a different, score for this? So that's another piece of it that we're looking through for the validity of it. But overall, I think it's really going to be really beneficial in a lot of ways to a lot of students, a lot of teachers, and just the community.
And just to build upon that, so part of the fast track is developing these interventions, plus also tracking. So we come back a 6-week session of, all right, so what are we going to do? Say a student or a group of students missing multiplication skills. So you come up with a strategy and ongoing assessing and then see if there is progress. So.
And then I would just say, our open house was on probably one of the worst weather nights of the year that we've had so far. And we had 71% of our families show up, which was awesome. And it was, just kind of getting back into the swing of having community in the building. But we had, the Cub Scouts here, we had our farm to school table. Our teacher came in because she's doing her portfolio. And so she talked to a lot of parents. I think families were really happy when they came in and just being able to go around and visit in the school. We didn't do a potluck. I've heard from a couple of people that we should have, but we didn't get there. We did ice cream sundaes and cookies and people seemed genuinely happy with that. One of my 6th graders came up to me the following morning and said, are we going to do another open house? And I think it was just that whole idea of having the community together. They absolutely loved it. And then the one other thing, I think we did go on a field trip to Castleton College. So did Middletown. And our bus drivers, who are not our bus drivers from here, said this was an absolute pleasure to drive the kids from Wells Village. They were amazing. And if you looked around the auditorium, I think you would agree we were really proud of our kids for how well they handled going on a field trip. Some of them had never been the college. It was a great program and it was really wonderful. They're looking forward to another field trip.
Same for Middletown.
Yeah,
I got
you were the bus driver.
You were the bus driver?
Yeah, he won't
That's
come
something-
drive the
that's
bus
just
here.
sucking up to you. I got about 60 kids that I'd love to mix into yours to see if I can get them to behave.
No, our kids were, our students were amazing. They really were. And we are on our 2nd school reward for PBIS. The first one, we did a dance party. Tomorrow, we're doing a snowball fight.
How's that going to go for you?
It's all those it was their decision. We asked for ideas and the next thing we're working on is face painting and temporary tattoos. So, yeah. It's been great. It is.
Any questions? Any other questions? All right, thank you both. We'll move on to finance. Lewis.
So the main topic of discussion tonight is budget and finance. If there's any questions about any monthly reports, I can take those first. We're ready to-
I did have a question about the student activity accounts. Is there just one on here, or isn't there an activity account for Middletown
There should
Springs?
be one for each school,
Okay.
not one in the packet.
Well, it just says, student activity accounts on here, but I can't tell exactly, like, okay, maybe this is it. There's 2 pages, and I guess it doesn't matter which kind of what, but I did have a question, that there's fingerprinting reimbursement on the student activity account.
You know, so
I don't, that's why I was like, I don't know how to
Probably-
tell.
I think it's probably Middletown Springs.
it's
Probably
on
the
the
first.
side of the school.
Yeah,
I would say
okay, it
Middletown.
is Middletown Springs.
It is,
All right.
it is. It's part of the pre-K, because an extra layer to be working the pre-K program, it takes a whole nother layer of getting fingerprinted for that, so we have paid for it.
Yeah, no, it was just kind of like just a curiosity question, like, is that like a typo, or is that like?
Yeah.
So for staff who are getting fingerprinted to be hired for their first placement, they have to pay that. We don't. But if there's staff that are already employed, that are asked to get second fingerprinting, want the backups for pre-K, have paid for in the last few years.
All right. That was the only question I had. Amanda?
I'm sorry, it's just a little hard to hear Lewis. I don't know, maybe if he's just further away. You can make it out, but you really have to try.
Want to slide up here?
Okay, yes, I'll talk more into the microphone.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
No problem. All right, anything else before we? Okay. So we're looking at the first draft of the budget. It was emailed out today, and it was also included in the packet, in the physical packet. So we are starting this process a little bit earlier. This is, usually we don't look at the first draft until November. So we're a little early in the process. There's a number of pieces of information that we don't have yet. And so anything that you see that's highlighted in the budget is stuff that's still pending. So like tuition and invoices, we do not have that information yet. We're still pulling that all together, being that school just started. We have to compare rosters, compare invoices from all the schools so that we can get an accurate count of students that we're sending out. So anything that's pending right now, we are leaving at last year's budget, so FY23 budget. And then as we go through the process, we'll update those. I expect to have updates on most of these things at the next meeting in November. Some of the other things that are still pending, anything that's SU based, we took the first look at the first draft at the last SU meeting in September. We did a really quick review of it and are going to do a more in-depth focus on that at the October meeting. So after that meeting, we'll update the assessments, any of the bill backs. Also, all of that will be updated for the next round. If you weren't at the SU meeting, the general fund budget was up less than 1%. I think it was about $18,000. And the special ed budget was up 2.7%, but only 1.2 of that is an actual increase. The rest of it was just a shift. It was reducing bill backs but increasing the budget, which gets assessed out. So it was a net zero increase in that portion of it. The actual portion that was up was about 120,000. That would be assessed out amongst all of the districts. But there's more information to to come on that at the next meeting. And if you didn't get a copy of that that meeting was in person, so if you, I don't think it was emailed out. If anybody wants to see a copy of that budget, just let me know and I can email it to you. And then, like I said, we'll go over the second draft at the next meeting. So looking at Wellspring's budget, the first page is just some of the summary of changes. Some of the changes that we'll go through are not on this. We'll have to discuss them in executive session. So those pieces, I didn't put it in the packet. So looking at the budget right now, we are up 3.4%, which is $184,000. And that's pretty much just bringing back all of our staffing with the increases from the ESP and the teacher settlements, as well as an increase in health insurance. Right now, we are taking a shot in the dark. We have a 10% estimate in there, which is approximately $31,000. We're hoping to have more information by the next meeting. Vspa has not given us an estimate yet, so we're not really sure what that's going to look like. We know we saw several years of double-digit increases. Last year was at a 5.2% increase. I would love to see something single-digit around that 5%, or less would be great too, but it does really start adding up though when we look at double digits. We're looking at insurance now, well, it has been for many years, but when you look at a family plan, it's a significant part of someone's compensation. And sometimes you look at your lower paid staff and the health insurance can be more than their actual salary. So it does have a huge impact on budgets, insurance. Educational spending, which is the amount we're raising in property taxes. It's your total expense minus your local revenues, is currently up 4.3%, $213,000. And we'll look at more specifics on that in a minute. Like I mentioned, tuition and other highlighted items are still pending. Last year, we finished the year with $182,000 surplus. Right now, I have that full surplus in the budget going in as a revenue, which is, so that's a local revenue that's decreasing your educational spending. So looking at the details, you go to page 1 or page 2 of the budget. We would look at the revenues are at the top. So if you could look at I just want to point out a few things. So the fund revenue, that's where your surplus is. So as I mentioned, we had $182,000 surplus. But last year we had a $210,000 surplus. So we are starting the year with approximately $30,000 less in surplus, which is decreasing the amount of revenue that we're raising. And that's why we're seeing that educational spending is up compared to last year. Tuition revenue is still pending. The big number there, that's their state revenue. And then the small school support grant, that number is a stable number because we merged. So that number stays the same, at least until the legislators change their mind. So then going to the bottom of page 1, we start looking at the budget. The budget is broken down by sections. So first you're going to have the Middletown budget. And in the Middletown budget, you're going to have a different section for each department in essence. So we call them functions. So the first section is instruction. So that's where you would have most of your teachers. You have your teachers, any regular ed IAs, your after-school programs, and then all of the benefits and costs associated with instruction. So supply lines, books, stuff like that. And then we also have any bill backs that are related to instruction. So right now it's the special ed bill backs from your paras, and for last year it was paras and teachers, was that piece that was ineligible. And then continuing on from there is your technology, your library. So each department has its own little section. After you go through Middletown, you would have the same thing for Wells. And I'm not going to go through each and every line, but definitely I will take questions if there are any. After you look at the Wells section, there's the Wellspring section. And so the Wellspring section is anything that's a shared program. So the first thing that you have is instruction, and that's where you find your teachers that are shared amongst the two schools. So you have your foreign language teacher, your art teacher, your music teacher, and any other shared teachers. You have your shared librarian. Certain things that we did move to the shared level, such as counseling, because there was a time when we had a shared counselor. Now they are separate, but we still have them at the district level. Plan operations, we have at a shared level, even though each one has their own staffing, but it is at the district level. And then some of at the end on page 8, you have your totals, which we went over. So, but I'll go over those one more time. So total expenditures is up 184,000, 3.4%. And then education spending is up 213,000, 4.9%. As I mentioned, so most of the increase that you're seeing right now would be inflationary costs due to the settlement of the 2 contracts, and as well as any increases and changes in benefits. So if somebody shifted from a single plan to a family plan, or a family plan to a single plan over the course of the last year since we budgeted, all of that will be reflected in here. The 10% increases will be reflected, as well as any feedback that I got from the principals on changes in lines. I don't think there were very many, if any, actually, like supply lines and stuff like that. Those have a minimal impact on the budget. The biggest pieces of your budget are staffing, benefits, and tuition. And we'll go over staffing in more details in executive session. So the staffing is in here based on current staffing. Tuition is just an estimate. That's the other thing that'll have a significant impact. Hopefully, we'll see a positive impact going into next review of the draft. But we won't know that until we have those numbers together. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah. Amanda?
Louis, I see there's small numbers, but there's a couple of sections like health and Board of Education, and I think there was one other area where there's a travel expense now for 250. I'm just wondering why that was. What is that exactly?
Under health services,
Yeah.
so that was budgeted last year. Nothing was spent. So that's just that is a travel line for mileage reimbursement in case the nurse has to travel to, whether it be a training or central office or another school. There's a travel line in a lot of the sections.
Yeah.
So instruction, it's just to cover mileage for staff members, and that's based on the IRS rate per mile.
Okay.
On page 6 with the tuition, I know you said the highlighted stuff, you'll have more information. Will that information, or are you waiting for for tuition to be announced for some of that stuff, or just numbers on?
We'll start the process using estimates for tuition. So we'll take what the tuition was this year, and I usually apply a 3% estimate. I'm not sure if that'll hold this year with the inflationary rates that all schools are facing. I know last year we saw some at 3%, and then we saw like Rutland City increase their tuition by 14%. So I'll take a look at it at 3% and see what kind of impact that has. But the biggest thing is looking at the students. So we take everybody that we had last year. We can take everybody that we had last year and move everybody up a grade. But then we know there's also a lot of move-ins, move-outs. So we like to really look at the rosters that we get from, say, Pulteney and Mill River and Long Trail, so that we can see who's actually attending, and then we'll move those kids up a grade. Because right now, if we're working on last year's data, we're moving them up 2 grades, and a lot of movement can happen in 2 years. So we rather look at this year's data and move them up to 1 grade rather than looking at last year's. And this year's data is just still coming in.
Okay. Another question. What was that? There's another, I guess, kind of general SU question. It had to do with transportation. It was on page 7. I know it's budgeted the same as, for this year. Did you expect that to go up significantly? Or I thought, don't we have a contract with them? Is it
So we are actually in our last year of our contract. So we'll have to decide whether it's worth going back out to bid, or I think the contract does call for a increase at the CPI level. So that is something that I will have to take a closer look at, and I haven't had a chance yet, so that's why I still do have that.
Yeah, because we did that, when we did that last contract, that was done.
We did it when we merged, so, and it was a 5-year contract.
Yeah, and it was done like toward the end of the school year too, if I remember correctly.
I think we needed it in place for the first year of the merger, which would have been 2019. So we had 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 would be our 5 years. So next year will be the first year that we don't have a current contract.
Okay.
Well, you saved your butt on that one, because it's gonna go higher in tech when you have to redo that one.
Oh
Well,
my
that's done at the SU level, so it's gonna be,
It all trickles down from there.
okay, Amanda?
With the after-school program and the summer program budgets, I thought we had discussed maybe increasing those numbers. Did we decide that keeping them the same was appropriate, or I noticed that they are the same, but I just thought that we had talked about, since we weren't using the grants this year, for now and next year, and then kind of the enrollment increasing and Middletown not being able to have it before with staffing. And did we talk about increasing that, or is that not a discussion that we decided to?
So to address the after-school programs first, so we do have budgets in there. There's a Middletown budget of $25,000 and a Wells budget of, I believe it's $12,000. I do have the Wells budget item highlighted because they actually overspent their budget last year, and so I do need to take a closer look at it and discuss that with the administration to see what has changed with the program and why we went over, and do we need to either make structural changes to the program or increase that budget. And then same thing with Middletown. So Middletown was way under, so sort of vice versa. Was there something that affected that budget to be under? Can we shift some of those funds to Wells so that both programs are funded appropriately? Those are discussions that still need to happen on the after-school program, but hopefully we have enough in those two lines to fund both programs for next year. If we don't, it should be just a minimal increase between what we've spent versus what we have budgeted when you add both schools together. For summer school, we have $3,500 budgeted for both schools, and that is not nearly enough to fund the programs that you have been having the last few years. I think this is a much bigger discussion, and a discussion that we've started at the SU level. When ESSER funds do go away, what is going to be, what is the program going to look like? Is it still going to be a building-based program? Is it going to be an SU-based program with SU hubs, and that the cost is shared amongst the SU schools? These are discussions that need to happen at both the SU level and at the district level. I think it's unsustainable unless you really want to see large increases in your taxes to continue the type of program you have been having. Just for Wells and Middletown, you spent, I did provide information at the SU meeting on the cost of each of the summer programs for the schools. And just in ESSER funds alone, the Wells program spent approximately $50,000. So that would be a pretty large impact on this budget. So I think those are discussions that we need to have in this budget cycle, as well as next year as well. The impact won't hit Wellspring's budget for next year because we do still have ESSER funds for another 2 summers. But I think we want to start looking towards the future so that we can start moving in the right direction. Whether if this is going to be a locally funded program, then start planning appropriately in your budgets. And if it's going to be an SU-based program, we need to make those shifts, start designing that program for next summer, and so that we can start making those shifts and doing that planning with ESSER funds. And this way, we can put that cost on the ESSER. And then when those ESSER funds are gone, we already have the structure of the program all planned, and it's just a matter of assessing that cost to the schools that are participating.
Okay, yeah, I guess I would like to see us start, with this budget that we're looking at right now, just slowly increasing I know Middletown joined Wells last year, and I think that was great. But I also think for some families, it would be great to have it in both schools. And I agree, $3,500 is not nearly enough. So I guess my preference would be to start slowly increasing it now, and maybe look at increasing that 3,500, even if it's just a little bit. But I guess that's all I have for that.
So I think it's a great conversation, but also decide what the program is going to look like. Back when pre-COVID, we had a 4-week, 3-day program, and it was a pretty good program. So you could do a lot within that time, but it's a discussion. What does the community need? I know we've had I appreciate the Cadillac program that Middletown Springs had 2 summers ago, and unfortunately staffing. So it is a discussion. What do we want, and what does the community want to pay for? So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also part of that discussion is it free to families, or is it a low cost, even if it's only $5 or $10 per kid per day, which might help make up a little piece, because right now it's been free to families, which is awesome, but maybe we just charge a little bit to make up a little of the difference or something.
I read somewhere that the retail cannabis tax is going towards summer school, summer programming. Is that something you know
I haven't
about?
heard that, so I
Okay.
can definitely look into it.
Okay. I'm not saying that that's like a huge, I don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but, and how they disperse that income.
Well, Matt, I know that 2 years ago, when Senator Sanders spoke to all the superintendents about this additional funding stream to create summer programming, one of the concerns that the superintendents had was around whether or not they're going to become like a rec program for our schools. That in years past, we've always had no issues providing academic opportunities or rich opportunities, but were we now going to be like the summer camp for our communities? And so Senator Sanders was pushing that, and so we said it's difficult for staff and providing models, but we also looked at that funding cliff. I was like, well, when this money goes away, then have we created this expectation that we would continue with this, and should that really fall upon the schools or the districts, or is that more of a community-based issue? And so I think, we've not heard that as of yet. That might be something that we hear at the upcoming VSA meetings around this, but I think they might look at more creative ways to sustain these programs in our schools, provide more funding streams for us. But as Rick and Carolyn was said, it's a discussion we're having in all of our communities around what that summer programming looks like, and what's the expectation, and really, to be honest, also what should fall upon the school shoulders too, as well as the district's shoulders for summer programming. Is that more of a community-based issue as rather than a school-based issue?
Question on what's a bill back?
So there's many types of different expenses that it makes sense for the SU to pay for them, because one of many different reasons. It could be as a staff member that's shared across buildings, or a staff member that is partially funded by a grant. So those are the main 2 top reasons. So the SU would pay for that expense, and then that expense is then broken down into pieces and billed back to the districts that actually use that expense. So for an example, so last year with special ed, if there was a paraeducator who worked in Wells, and we assigned a certain percentage of their time as what we called ineligible under the reimbursable special ed model, which means that they're spending time on regular ed services that was not eligible for reimbursement under the special ed. So we took that piece, and we would bill that piece of their salary and compensation back to the Wells Springs School District. And then, so we have, when we look at the SU budget, and we look at all the staffing that is funded at the SU, we will also look at what piece of that staffing needs to now be funded, the remainder, to get them to 100% by the other districts. And there'll be a separate sheet that I give out at the SU level, which includes all of those bill backs. Another example is, say, the Interventionist at Wells. She's funded 30% through the title grant, which is a SU grant So it doesn't make sense to split her up and have her get paychecks from two different districts. So she'll get her paycheck 100% from the SU. The SU will cover the 30%, and then the other 70% we code to a special fund which pertains to just wells, and then we'll take that piece and we'll bill it back at the end of the year to make the SU whole.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions that are not really staffing related, contract related?
Yeah, so I think when we had previous discussion, we talked about some of the surplus, using it as like a reserve fund versus revenue.
Yep.
And I think you were leaning, I think your suggestion was to have it as like a reserve fund for facility and such, because you couldn't count on there being a surplus every year.
Yep.
And get people in the mindset that, you know, 1 year there's no surplus and the taxes go up or so forth. So this is putting all the surplus, no reserve,
Correct.
doesn't need a voting referendum or anything for that.
That's correct. So right now, this is built using that full surplus, which, as you mentioned, is not necessarily a good idea, because if this year we end the year and we have zero surplus, then when we look at building the following year budget, we're going to be looking at $182,000 revenue shortfall. I would recommend that we take a piece of that. We know we have building needs, and we know we're using some of the building. We've talked about using some of that building reserve this year potentially on repairs in the two schools. So it's definitely something the board's going to need to discuss to see whether they want to continue putting some of that into the reserve fund. We have $35,000 in there right now. That there's $35,000 in the Well Springs Reserve Fund. There's also another $15,000 in the Wells Reserve Fund that is from pre-merger. We also have, not in reserve funds, but in the budget, there's a $35,000. Each school has a $35,000 repair line, which is to pay for their daily repairs expenses throughout the year. But there is a $35,000 joint Well Springs line that we added. I don't know if last year was the first year, maybe 2 years ago. That's shared. So once the schools have exhausted their $35,000, then they need to communicate and they can share that other $35,000 based on the district priorities before they tap into reserve funds. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What was last year's reserve? Like,
We put in $210,000 into the as revenue, and $35,000 into the reserve fund.
35.
Yep.
Amanda?
I might just be missing it, but Louis, can you tell me what the budgeted amount for like our facilities improvements and maintenance is? I'm not seeing that.
It's on page. It's on page 7, about halfway down the page. So the total facilities expense, that includes staffing and electricity, fuel, everything, is $424,000. That's what we have budgeted. The repairs line is $35,000 per school plus $35,000 for Well Springs. So the rest would be salaries, benefits, fuel, electricity, supplies, plowing, lawn care. Does that answer your question?
It does. Do we feel like that is a comfortable number for the needs at Wells, or do we feel like we need to look at that? Just know there's a lot of building improvements that need to be addressed, and I just don't know if we've budgeted appropriately for that.
Well, we have been building these amounts up, these repairs lines up over the last few years. They're actually quite a bit higher than they were when we had first merged. And the $35,000 for Well Springs is a completely new line. The other school lines were, I think, were about $20,000 So we have been building them up because we do know that there's a lot of maintenance that was maybe deferred in the past because that amount was so small. It's all a question, it's a balancing act. I mean, how much do you want to put on the taxpayers? What kind of increase do you want to see in this budget? And so every dollar that you put into this line is one less dollar or one more dollar you have to cut somewhere else, or one less dollar you put somewhere else. So it's really, what do you think the priorities are? And I know we still need to discuss staffing, but this budget is already at a pretty significant increase. We know we were teetering on the edge of the excess spending threshold last year, so this year I'd imagine we'll get even closer. The excess spending threshold is paused from FY25 to FY29, but there is still FY24, so there's the potential that we could exceed it for next year. And then once that pause ends, and the pause is due to the implementation of the weighting study, which is supposed to have a positive impact on wells. We're still waiting on some updated information from the state on the changes to that weighting study based on the changes that the legislators made, as well as because we're now, I think that weighting study is probably about 2 years old at this point. So just the changes in ADM and everything affected poverty rates, stuff like that.
And I will say, as far as like the facilities go, the facilities committee is looking at building repairs, also looking at a 5-year plan, including building assessments, and those will really expose any major needs the buildings will need. But just a couple of years ago, the building repair line was 30,000, if I remember correctly. So I mean, it is going up. But,
I just worry about the cost of materials, I guess. Like, I know right now if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you try to buy something, you're paying twice or 3 times as much as you paid pre-COVID. And I just worry currently with our stuff that we have to fix, have we thought about just the natural inflation that we're going to have for materials plus the labor, right? That was my only thought with that. Like, a sheet of plywood now is $60, not $17. So
So Middletown was at 30 and Wells was at 20. So we've worked to repair some of those inequities to make that FY19 was the first year budget. So I know, like I said, we've worked on increasing those.
And is there a balance currently? Like, do both schools just expend that 35, or does it carry over?
So if you look on that page 7, it doesn't carry over. It goes into the surplus unless it's the part of the reserve fund that they're spending. But that first column is what was spent last year, so FY22 actuals. So Middletown spent 25 and Wells spent 24.
So I can tell you this year, just between blowing out a hot water heater, some heat controls, I feel pretty confident we don't need to worry about it. Well,
The painting project.
the painting on top of that, but we lost a hot water heater a couple weeks ago. And then there's some heating controls that we're gonna have to update, so. Yeah, so I feel pretty confident.
I have something for you. Out of these things, where can you cut? Don't even give me that look. You did that before. You can do it. I've seen you do it.
I mean, there's 2 things you can do. You can nickel and dime all the little lines and try to save some money.
I'm looking at lawn care.
What's
I'm
that?
looking at your garbage removal and stuff like that. Have you gone out for bid, or do you bid for them still, or did you-
We
I mean,
bid trash removal.
And Casella came out the cheapest?
We bid it as an SU contract, and Casella's was the only one that offered us an SU contract. There was discussions actually just the other day about not doing it as an SU and doing
That
it
would be a
locally.
smart idea.
So it's something we can look at. But again, these are small lines, so even if you save, so you can, like I said, you can nickel and dime these lines and maybe you can get 10,000 savings.
But that could be
15,
10,000
depending on
put
how much you
somewhere
want
else.
to cut.
10,000 that you may need for another,
Yeah, you could
Open
definitely find that, but your big expenses are salary and benefits.
well, salary and benefits, that's a negotiation issue, and that's already lost, correct? We've already doing a 3-year contract now? 3 years for that? So you've lost that. There's no way you can fix that unless.
Well, there are things we were talking about in executive session.
And then you're gonna have to go to your smaller lines, because you can't do anything with it. I would definitely start,
Well,
because your budget's not gonna pass. You can't keep raising these things. People don't have the money. They're not gonna do that.
I know one thing that's, we've discussed before, and, you know, Lewis has brought up as well, is about, I think, food service is something I think the board should discuss and consider, and take a look at. And that goes back to what Lewis was saying before about priorities, and it's a high priority, and, you know, keeping a food service, which is a little bit higher priced and more like Cadillac model, but at the cost of losing other things. But if we look at, you know, shifting to food service that is in line with our other two schools, and that would allow you to either reduce the overall line or allow for other items. I think there are items that I think should be discussed.
I agree. You can't add to a budget that's going to barely passing out. I don't see that.
So I
Doesn't
think
make
what
sense.
the board needs to decide, and not necessarily tonight, but I think we do need some feedback, is looking at where we are, where do you want to see us at the next meeting, where do you want to see us with our final budget, so that, I mean, we have something to work towards, and we need to go back and look at every line to see where we can cut, then that's something where we do, but we need to sort of have a target in mind. We can't just do it blindly. So we don't, if we're looking for 20,000, then we'll find the $20,000. But we need to know what that number is. Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000?
As far as I'm concerned, let's see if we can do 100,000, but that's getting, but I'm the only one here.
We'd have to, I think that would have to cut staff or reach that amount. Amanda?
Louis, what is on page 5 with the counselor service? What are the purchase services?
So purchase services are service, it's like a bill back, it's a service that we're, so it is a bill back. So it shows up, we call them bill backs, but on the budget, it's actually the counting line, according to the state, is a purchase service. So that line was set up when the counselor was an SU employee, because they were also, in that case, they were a special ed employee that was shared between special ed and counseling.
Okay.
That has now changed, so that will go away for this current budget, and actually, there's nothing budgeted there.
Yep.
Because both counselors are employed by the district.
Okay. And I'm sorry, my last question, I'm also going back to page 7, kind of looking for, I see like snow removal, lawn care, all of that. Where electricity, where's the heating?
The oil?
Yeah, oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
That's also a concern.
Yeah, that
did
was
look
my
at-
thought.
I did look at that line and saw that we only spent 18 last year. We did have an extremely low rate last year, so I went out to bid 2 years ago. After COVID hit and oil dropped to below $40 a barrel, I went out to bid immediately and did a 2-year contract. And so we had locked in for $1.65 in FY '21, and then $1.75 in FY '22. So I went back out to bid this summer, and we are locked in for this year at $3.65.
Okay. I wonder if, kind of going secondary to that, I wonder if we should look at some of our facility stuff sooner rather than later, because I think if some of our repairs were done before winter, then if possible, or as soon as possible, we could save on that, at least in wells. I think I don't know, just, it might not save a lot, but with the cost increasing and the adjustments that need to be made, we might want to look at doing that sooner rather than later.
You did the fuel oil for like the whole SU, right?
The bid is SU-wide, yes. But each school pays for their own fuel.
Yep. Is that coming up again at the end of this? or-
So the 365 is for this current school year. So we're not locked in for next year, so keep our fingers crossed that oil goes down for next year.
Yeah, kind of like with the transportation thing though too, that bid's coming up too, and so those numbers can,
Yeah, we know fuel oil is always a variable these days. I don't typically lower our budget amount when we get a lower bid than we anticipate, because I don't want to see our fuel line go up and down, so I sort of keep it steady, it's there in the middle. So the budget is based on when fuel was at high twos, low threes. So we can absorb some fluctuation. And so we had significant savings the last 2 years when we were at $1.65 and $1.75. So, I mean, it's anybody's guess is what it'll be at next year. Could be at 250, could be at 450. So, I think it's at a good place right now, the budget. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to put a little more in there, but if you put it in there, then you have to take it from somewhere else. So.
I had a question about substitutes.
Yep.
I know that the SU has a substitute coordinator. So all the lines for Kelly Services, did we really spend? Because I noticed there's a new line for SU purchase substitutes. Did we have 41,000 budgeted for all those
Yes.
before? Okay.
So I took dollar for dollar how much we had budgeted in all the different many lines, moved it to this one line.
Okay.
We haven't spent $41,000, and that's mainly because the last few years subs have not really been available. Our substitute coordinator has been doing a great job recruiting. She's out. She's got ads out in the newspaper. She's going to job fairs. She was at the state fair. So she's actively recruiting every day, looking for subs. So and the sub pool is growing. The offset to having more subs available is that you're going to spend more because you're going to fill more sub positions. So when you don't fill a sub position, you don't have any expense. So when you do fill it, so we will look at spending more money. In addition to that, we have increased the rate to remain competitive. So before our rate for paraeducators subs was $12.55, and it's kind of hard to get somebody ambitious enough to come into schools for $12.55. So we increased the rates to $15 an hour for all of our subs to help grow that sub pool. And I think it was definitely appreciated by all of our subs.
All right. Amanda?
When we made that change, did we cut substitutes in our buildings? I guess I feel like this year I just see a lot less subs available and helpers around, and I didn't think when we made that difference, that change, that we had cut people. Did we do that, or is it just lack of availability?
The only shift that we've made was during the first 2 years of COVID, we had what we considered local subs. So each building, upon availability, had a sub in their building every day as a floater sub. And that was to cover those unanticipated absences the day of. So we still wanted to fill the open positions that were open days prior, but we knew based on people getting sick and just the atmosphere that we were in the last 2 years that there was absences that were occurring that day So each building had a person in their building to help, to be a floater to help fill those absences. That local sub position was eliminated.
Do we,
That was those were ESSER funded.
okay. Maybe this is a Rick and Carol question, but do we feel like they're needed, or do we feel like they were helpful during COVID and they were eliminated because of COVID and we don't need to look at that any deeper?
Just to go off on Lewis, I mean, the new lady doing the subs is, I think, doing a great job, but still, we're not getting to the subs that we need. And even the local sub last year, we've been short on people for 2 years, just the reality, so.
Wells in Middletown have always been difficult getting stuff just due to your location rurally. So, I mean, it's just all about getting word out in the community and I mean, if there's a stay-at-home mom or a grandmother or a grandfather that would like to, is bored and wants to come in and sub for a day, then those are the type of people that are great and that we're looking for. Someone, a day here, a day there, that's one less absence that's unfilled. So there's a process, they have to go through the onboarding process, but it's fairly straightforward. But she's working getting that word out, and there's things on our websites, and like I said, so if you know anyone in the communities that's looking for something to do, 1 day a week, 1 day a month, definitely refer them.
Would we think that because of our location and our difficulty finding subs, it would be beneficial for us to have somebody every day, even if they alternated schools only in the morning until noon or something? So then we have a person. Is it better to look for somebody that's always there, or no? I know I keep talking more money, but I'm trying to think about what is beneficial.
Well, staffing is an issue in general. We know there's staffing shortages locally, nationally, statewide. I mean, we have para vacancies that are positions with benefits. The local subs was a lower hourly rate with no benefits, and we have para vacancies that are higher rate with benefits that are unfilled. So even if we had local sub positions available, it would be tough to fill them, and most likely you would be pulling from your sub pool in order to fill those positions. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's not like you're just adding a position in your building. You're pulling the resource from somewhere else. And again, that would need to be a local expense.
All right. Well, we do need to have an executive session, so I think if no one has any other questions pertaining to those non-personnel, we can finish up the rest of the agenda and then just have an executive session tonight to talk about those personnel-related issues. All right? All right. So thank you, Louis. So we'll move on to old business. So we have the board operating protocols. This is just kind of, it's the same document, just looks a little bit different. And basically just for the board to look over again for any other additional suggestions that hasn't come before the supervisory union board, like I discussed last month. So any suggestions for changes or deletions? One thing that I noted was number 11, study sessions. I'm not even sure what that means as far as board work goes. My first thought was that could potentially be removed. So, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. Hopefully, everyone gets familiar with that document. Are there any discussion on the board operating protocols?
I have the same question.
What's that?
I have the same question as you about the study sessions.
Yeah. I mean, my thought would be to just strike that out. But, you know, we'll definitely be seeing this again, so. So we'll just move on to, VHI voting member proxy.
So, last time we voted on the Vspa and VSBA proxy, which Eric established that he was going to be at the meeting, so therefore he'd be voting on behalf of the Wellspring Board. About a week and a half after that, we received notification from VHI, they'll also be holding there, and that's the Vermont Health Initiative. They'll be having their annual meeting on Friday morning at 9 o'clock, and so the board would have to do the same as they did for the Vspa and the VSBA, would either be to approve, Eric to be, represent the Well Springs board, or would appoint a proxy. So you just need action on that.
I'd be willing to do it. I'll be there voting for a bunch of stuff. If someone wants to make a motion, or if somebody wanted to be the proxy, either way. And
I'll make a motion that will be our representative voice voter.
you?
No, I'm sorry, that you would be.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Motion made by Matt to make myself the voting member. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. All right. Thank you. Policies. We have B2, F10, G1, G3, G4, G11, and G13 that are second reads. If there's no questions, we'd be looking for a motion to adopt these tonight. I believe these have been.
I would make a motion to adopt them. I think they all look good.
All right. Leave my hand up. All those in favor of adopting those policies, say aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? Meredith, are you there? All right, maybe she stepped away. And you said yes. Okay. All right, motion carries unanimously.
Can I ask a question regarding policies, not these ones in particular?
Yes, of course.
Cool. So I saw recently that there was a school district in Vermont that was like cyber attacked with some transphobia stuff. It made the news. Just curious if there was, and that sort of got me thinking, like, is there like an inclusion diversity statement policy that we have that we, I don't know, like a code that we ask vendors to sign off on, or that deal with the school as sort of a way to say, I don't know, a signal that we are accepting and.
I don't think so. I don't think we
Okay.
have, we have an equity policy.
So, Matt, there are certain state regulations, federal regulations around websites. I can actually ask Craig Connors to come to our next meeting and
Okay.
talk a little more about that if you'd like.
Okay.
He answers those questions directly about, about filtering, about security and privacy settings that, as we work with, third-party resources. Is that what you're asking about, or?
More of like this is how we operate. Like, we are accepting of, something for vendors to, I don't know, to say that, to sort of be out there to say, this is sort of the philosophy we believe in, and I don't know. I know that a lot of organizations do this. Just sort of have like a code that they ask external vendors who work with them to sign off on. And if that was something that we
I'll
did.
talk with
Yeah.
Greg and just
I
see.
mean, he
if
doesn't
there's
need to
a-
come in if he wants
Yeah.
to email me
Sure.
individually. We can
Okay.
have a discussion.
All right.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, was that, you
So
referred to like,
I just wonder if there's like a policy that we had, any expectation for like vendors? Any policy that we have for that? Vendors that have dealings with this, whether or not they're seeing if they're if they're not discriminatory in their hiring practices, things like that.
yeah, well, I mean, are you referring a BT Digger article, or is this something else?
I think recently, there was something where a school website was taken over and there was some, they're separate issues, but it just sort of popped in my head, like, is there something we have for vendors? And they're unrelated, but sort of related. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I know we don't have like a policy or something like that.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, we do have,
So Matt, I'll reach out to Greg, because I think, I should say, I think there are two. One is the fact that I think it's asked about the vetting, do we ask someone to sign off on a statement to say that
Right.
basically just, but I think also that we look at our security, just in case something would happen, how do we prevent that? So Greg will be able to answer those questions, and if you, based on the conversation.
Yeah, sorry, I think I muddied the waters by bringing up both things, but yeah, I can talk to him.
Okay.
that's a good point. Never know, something like that could happen.
This could also maybe come to policy committee, Eric, if we add it for a discussion after we hear what Greg has to say.
Oh, yeah. Policy. Okay, so we have a bunch of, actually, no, we only have 3 first read policies. Admission of resident students, the policy on non-discriminatory mascots and school branding. I hope everyone read that one. And then role and adoption of school board policies. Is there any discussion on the policies?
And that one and one.
Yes. Yep.
State is.
So that was born because of, I think because of a Rutland district had mascot issues.
No, we just had somebody.
Yeah,
that
I know.
I'm not gonna say
Yeah.
that.
So whatever it was, it went before the state board and then the legislature, and we have this policy that is required by statute. So no questions or concerns with any of these policies, Amanda?
I have a question on the admission of resident students. I see where it says like the superintendent shall consider the students' age and attendance, going on that way. But I don't know if that clearly covers kind of what we talked about before about if a child has, is a kindergartner somewhere else or first grader somewhere else, but would be a kindergartner with us. How do we handle that? I don't know if maybe we need more wording around that. If they were in kindergarten until April and then they come to us in May.
Amanda, so I think we actually kind of talked about this, I think, before
Yes,
when
they
we
don't
were
matter.
at so if a student, say, came from out of state, say from New York, or, we'll say Granville to be more specific, and they were in kindergarten, and regardless of age, they came to us that they would be enrolled as a first grader, regardless of their age. We would not send them back to kindergarten. They would come in at first grade.
But would they have to complete kindergarten or would they come in mid-year as a kindergartner? I guess that was kind of the confusion for me on this policy.
I think the same thing, if it began a grade, then they would continue with that grade if they transferred in or enrolled.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, I think they all look good. I would move through for second read.
You don't need a motion for these. These are here for feedback. And any suggestions or changes that would go back to the committee. Okay. I think that that wraps everything up. So we are going to, I'll move us into executive session for contracts that premature general public knowledge would clearly place a public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage. And we'll invite Lewis, Superintendent, and our administrators into executive session. Do we have a second link?
I sent it to
Oh, you sent it
Amanda
to-
and our authority.
Okay, so.
Wait, could I also ask a question? I probably should have mentioned it earlier, so it's okay to tell me no, but I just had a question around our hiring of staff that I wanted to ask. Could I ask that tonight as well?
Around I'm sorry, the what? What?
I just had a question about like the interview process and hiring of staff. It's a quick question.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I mean, is this about a specific staff member or is
Yeah.
it just in general?
It's kind of a general local or SU question around how we hire staffing.
Okay, I mean, so what's your question, Amanda?
I was just wondering if we hire a staff member that requires licensing, I was just wondering like if we assist them in getting that licensing renewed, or if we look that licensing has been renewed, or if there's any process around that.
So when we look to hire a staff member that requires licensing, the building administrator works with Christine McGinnis around, and we work closely with Ron Ryan, who is the licensing individual at the AOE. And we look at what license they would need, whether it be a provisional, emergency license, what it would take them. And so we would then help them out and set the plan, but then it would be up to the individual to kind of follow through with that. We have a variety of individuals in our SU right now who are currently working under provisionals, which they're assigned a mentor, and they actually have a plan with the state, and they're working towards a licensure. We also have some individuals who are working under an emergency license, more to fill some short-term gaps required by just leaves of absences. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Thank you.
Okay.
okay, all right. So for those who are, well, it's just Katie.
Just Katie. Just you, Katie.
We'll come back to this meeting link after executive session. So